Our vast and expanding and hauntingly beautiful universe is full of the mystery and wonder of God. Taking a glimpse of the cosmos through the Hubble telescope, one must stand in awe and wonder. According to astronomers, there are probably more than 170 billion galaxies in the observable universe, stretching out into regions of space 13.8 billion light years away from us in all directions. Our tiny blue planet is just a speck in this vast cosmos, yet it is full of life, miracles, and the extraordinary. Throughout the ages, those with religious sensibilities perceive the cosmos as a gift from God. Not only is everything a gift from God, but all of creation is truly a reflection of the face of God. Each galaxy, cluster, and nebula, the stars above and the seas below, every mountain, every human being, even the tiniest of insects, is filled with the presence of God. Life has developed on this blue planet to become extraordinarily diverse. However, these are gifts. Ecological marvels that took millions of years to evolve are now at grave risk. Powerful political and economic interests are threatening the survival of indigenous communities, marginalizing the poor, and deepening inequalities among people. Along the way, countless species all around the globe are being wiped out. Gus Speth, an American environmental lawyer and advocate, wrote, "I used to think the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science we could address these problems, but I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation, and we scientists don't know how to do that." Religions are about spiritual and cultural transformation. Pope Francis heard the cry of the poor and the earth and has responded. As a religious leader of the Universal Church, he is exhorting humanity to care for the spiritual welfare of society, to preserve and sustain the environment, to ensure sustainability and longevity of the earth for future generations. In the papal encyclical Laudato Si, Pope Francis calls all beings to come together, to improve human rights and respect human dignity, to attain social and economic justice, to affirm our moral responsibility to be good stewards of the earth and to care for all of creation. The Catholic Church is a communion of many churches, the largest being the Roman or Latin Church. But there are also 23 Eastern Catholic churches, each with its own liturgical, theological, spiritual, and disciplinary patrimonies. Through their unique charisms, the Roman and the Eastern Catholic churches can respond in complementary fashion to ecological and environmental concerns. It is critical to recognize the unique contribution and potentials of both Western and Eastern traditions so that the world can draw upon and integrate the full breadth of the theological traditions in the understanding of God's vision for all creation. I am thrilled that we are about to share this wonderful series with all who want to learn about the Universal Church's vision, both East and West, and her forms of celebration. We live in a time where environmental challenges prompt us to change our ways. The compelling and inspirational story of Dan and Sarah Denis documents a practical response and gives us hope. This young Saskatchewan couple has tried to respond to the ecological crisis by actually trying to implement Laudato Si into their everyday life as farmers. In direct response to the encyclical, the Denis family has widened their circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty.
Farming is not easy. It's not an easy life. It's a beautiful life, but it's financially not easy and it's hard. And my dad, having five boys, kind of pushed us all kind of away from the farming world, farming life. And so I moved on in life and had my 2-week paycheck, and I came across this new movement in the farming industry called regenerative agriculture, and it was something very beautiful because it was about exactly what Laudato Si talks about, but this is before Laudato Si was involved in our life or written. And Laudato Si came out and kind of just emphasized the calling that God was calling us to do, was to farm.
I think the idea to go organic originally was really, honestly, the moral sense of it. And I know there was a distinct moment after my 3rd child was born. I was pushing her in a stroller along our grid road, and she was probably only 2 weeks old, so just tiny. And all of a sudden, up over the hill comes a sprayer. And he's spraying chemicals. And I mean, when they're right next to you, when they're in the field right beside you and you're on the road, there's really not much you can do to get away from it. And I could feel, you know, my throat kind of starting to swell a bit. It almost brought like tears to my eyes, thinking, if this is making my throat react like this, what is it doing to a tiny 2-week-old baby? And I just ran as fast as I could with that stroller back to the house. And that's a really defining moment in my life where I thought, you know, we just can't use chemicals. We just don't know what, you know, we know of some stuff it's doing. And there's stuff that, you know, we're never going to know about the damage that it is doing. Laudato Si has influenced us in the way that we now purchase seed. Specifically for me with my garden, I now deal with a company who only sells like heirloom variety seeds, you know, non-GMO type of stuff. Because once you start looking at why we are where we are, it's because of greed. And you know, these seeds that are being modified, it's so that they produce more and so that they look more like what the consumer wants. And really what you find is when you start working with, you know, heritage varieties and, you know, non-GMO stuff, it's, there's nothing wrong with it. It produces a great vegetable, you know, and the way that God intended to, because really, I don't think we can imagine for a second that we are smarter than Him.
And so just being organic, Laudato Si kind of gives us the oomph of getting good seed and non-GMO if we can, as best as possible, because the society we live in so many genetically modified seeds and plants that our nutrition levels are down on each, with wheat or any of that sort, and the seed is one aspect of it, the soil is another aspect of it, but yeah, when it comes to diversity in our cropland, we try to focus as best as we can to have the authentic, real, pioneer style kind of seeds.
Well, with the chickens specifically, when we were looking for different layer breeds for our hens, we were purchasing heritage breeds. What's happening now is because of, you know, this greed and everything, we want to pack as many chickens as we can into a chicken barn, and we want to make sure that they like it and that they're not going to be under stress. So they've modified these breeds to become a very docile and high producing chicken. If you have a chicken barn and you pack it with, you know, hundreds of chickens, well, you want to make sure that every chicken in there is laying an egg per day. But that's really not how chickens are created to live, right? And chickens love to scratch the ground and they love to roam. So really you're taking away this natural instinctiveness that the Lord created them to have. So for us, when we choose the heritage breeds, these breeds, they're going to tolerate being outside better. They're going to be smarter. And so what I mean by smarter is that they will forage really, really well. So they will search around and be able to find their own food in the form of bugs and different plants and grass and stuff like that. Well, I think one of the ways that we hope our lifestyle now will impact our children is, first and foremost, we want them to live with God at the center of their lives. So I think bringing about that awe and wonder, letting them be in creation and really experiencing it.
Just in my own life, when you look at when you're out with the cattle or you're moving the chickens and you actually stop and you just listen. It's something that we don't hear if you're in the city or even on the farm itself. There's always a buzz going on, but there's just something about being out there and to hear the animal breathe, move around. There's beauty there, and I really want my children to cherish those moments of silence, to really contemplate and to look around and to see what can I learn from the moment that I'm in. Right? It's God's creation, just truly living without us interfering. And we really leave the animals in their element. You just really leave them do what they were called to do, which is to live and to eat and provide food for us. But for our children, I want them to responsibility to learn that God can give you animals, but you can also make the failure of letting the animal die, or the responsibility of what God's given you. You are in charge and you must take care of it. And I want our children to learn at a young age that plants and animals, those are all God's creation, and He's given it to us to take care of it.
I love this topic of evangelization, especially when it comes to Laudato Si. We read an author whose name is Joe Salatin. He talks about, the wonder of God's creation, but he says that when he goes to, a convention where there's all these people concerned for creation and the environment, and when he tries to speak about Christ to them, they say, how can you believe in a creator when you don't care for his creation? And I think this is huge for us, especially Catholic Christians, is now to really start turning that around and starting to treat creation like as if we love our Creator, like it just doesn't really add up. If we treat this gift He's given us with disrespect, then it doesn't show anyone that we care who the person who gave it to us is. So I think that Laudato Si can be used hugely in the world of evangelization with anyone concerned with the environment. Just to present and say, look, the church has been talking about this for many years, and here's a recent document. Here's what it has to say about how Pope Francis, I think, is sneakily putting this out there to everyone as a means of evangelization, because he preaches the gospel message in there and it makes sense. This is why Laudato Si is so important for everyone, because we're surrounded by predominantly Christian farmers here. But if you mention to them why they shouldn't be using chemicals, they just turn from that. So we need this teaching to come from the church. It's the same as, serving the poor and putting God above all else. Like, we need this teaching to come from the church. It definitely has to be more readily available, because that is going to help change things, at least at first among Catholic Christian farmers.
The story of Dan and Sarah Denis can teach us that our faith is rooted in God's love for us and our desire to return that love. Their story speaks about transformation, conversion, the common good, the role of sacrifice, all of which are needed for an effective and proportionate response to the ecological crisis. Motivations based on fear, economics, politics, or reason alone will not be sufficient for the magnitude of conversion required, nor for the endurance that will be necessary. Faith and love, informed by the encyclical of Laudato Si and the mystical traditions of the entire Catholic Church, link us to the fullness of creation and make the transformation of the world into the kingdom of God possible. Thank you for joining us.